Do you know what it feels like to be ripped apart by badgers? Sounds absurd, right? I was desperate. That's the only reason I even looked at the job listing. No, it wasn't a weird scientific study. It wasn't an illegal animal versus human dark web game show. It was at Centre Parcs. The listing was hidden at the bottom of a newspaper, tucked between house sitter wanted for Manor House and an ad for age reversing skin cream. Night watchman needed for a brand new Centre Parcs location. I didn't even know there was a Centre Parcs near Corvus Vale. It had a small white bird above the logo instead of the usual green one. I should have known from that there was something off. I applied anyway, obviously. Who turns down £40 an hour to sit on their arse all night? The interview was, well, not really an interview. I called the number and expected an immediate rejection given my complete lack of experience. Hello? I'm calling to inquire about your night watchman position? A gruff voice responded.
Yeah, you done this before?
Well, actually, no, but I'm a quick learner and...
What's your fitness level?
I'm sorry?
How fast can you run?
And that was basically it. Once they found out I used to run for the local Harriers, I had a trial. I arrived the next night having spent the last of my money on a decent pair of sturdy shoes.
Shiny.
An absolute fridge of a man muttered, pointing at them as he greeted me at the door. The guy was a mountain. Easily 6'4", maybe taller, and just massive. Not gym massive, but like retired rugby player who'd swapped the pitch for a desk and a few too many donuts. His uniform looked like it had given up negotiating with his torso years ago.
They're going to get ruined.
I was still trying to think of a reply as he turned on his heel and ushered me into reception.
I'm John.
He gestured to himself with his whole hand.
And this is Linda.
A small professional-looking woman glanced at me from over the rim of her glasses, nodded once, and returned to her crossword.
Job's pretty basic.
John continued.
Hop on buggy, circle the park, rinse and repeat. The only trouble you get here is trouble you cause. Follow the rules and it's easy money.
Linda murmured something from the corner. I didn't catch it. John shot her a glare and ushered me back outside.
This,
he announced, pointing at a battered golf cart like he was presenting a prize on a game show.
Is Betsy. 0 to 15 in under 15 seconds.
I gave him a confused smile. He seemed genuinely pleased with the speed.
I know. You could probably run faster. That's a good thing. Fitness is important.
I opened my mouth to speak, but he was determined to get through his tour.
Right. Dead easy. Push and go. Do you have a license? Doesn't matter. Private property. Moving on.
He shoved a crumpled map into my hands.
You follow the route marked in green. Stay off the red trail.
Why? I interrupted.
Badgers.
He said bluntly. I stifled a laugh.
Don't knock the badgers, love. They're vicious if cornered, or spoken to, or looked at.
He trailed off.
Right, you're all set.
That made me jump. So, who'll be shadowing me tonight?
No need for shadows.
He bellowed at his own joke.
It's dark. Seriously, you're fine. You don't need one.
He chucked the keys at me as he backed away. He made it as far as the reception doorway before I thought to ask about the handover.
Coffee's in my drawer.
He called back.
Oh, and the rules are in the glove box. Read them. Follow them. Don't start trouble.
But The door slammed shut before I could finish. The second the reception door shut, the place changed. The warmth of the building fell away behind me so quickly it almost felt personal, as if the door hadn't just closed but had chosen a side. 1 minute there'd been low lighting, stale carpet and a humming vending machine and Linda's crossword pen scratching quietly in the corner. The next, there was only the dark spread of the car park ahead of me, and the uneasy feeling that I'd just been left outside with something that knew I was new. I climbed into Betsy, opened the glove box, and nearly jumped when it dropped down with a loud plastic clack that echoed far more than it should have. Inside was a torch, a packet of mints gone soft with age, and a folded bit of paper with rules written across the front in thick black marker. I stared at it for a second. The paper was creased so many times it barely unfolded properly. There were damp marks around the edges. One corner looked as if somebody had tried to tear it off and then changed their mind. The handwriting shifted all over the page too. Some of it was neat and blocky, and some of it looked like it was rushed. One line had been pressed into the paper so hard I could see the grooves before I even read the words. I switched on the torch and angled it down at the list, more for comfort than light. The little yellow beam shook slightly in my hand, which annoyed me because I wasn't scared. I was standing in a family holiday park, holding a list of what was almost certainly stupid initiation bollocks. At worst, I thought John had a weird sense of humour and Linda was one of those women who acted mysterious to entertain themselves between crosswords. At best, I was about to earn 40 quid an hour for driving in circles and pretending badgers were part of a serious workplace hazard. The first line was underlined twice. Rule 1. The Red Lodge. Lodge 404. There is no Lodge 404. If you see a lodge with a red door near Seven Oaks, do not approach. If you hear a family laughing inside, blow your whistle once and walk away backwards. I read that twice, then looked up towards the trees as if I expected the Red Lodge to rise out of them on cue. There was something deeply unpleasant about the wording, not the obvious part. Anyone could write there is no Lodge 404 if they wanted to be cryptic and dramatic. It was the rest of it that got under my skin. Why would a family be laughing inside a lodge that didn't exist? I went to the next rule. Rule 2. The Lost Child. Use due diligence, but if you find a child crying near the pancake house, holding a stuffed owl, you must ask them the colour of the owl. If they say brown, escort them to the gatehouse. If they say, it's a badger, drop your torch and run to reception. I stared at that one long enough for the silence around me to start pressing in. The pancake house sat somewhere deeper in the park. I'd seen it marked on the map with a cheerful little icon that suggested maple syrup, sticky tables and middle-class exhaustion. Seeing it written here in black marker made it sound like the site of a previous incident, one that had gone badly enough to earn its own procedure. Ask them the colour of the owl. Not their name, not where their parents were, not whether they were hurt. Ask them the colour. Right, I muttered to nobody. I kept reading. Rule 3. Routes. Follow the green marker on the map only. The red route is not for you. If you realise you've taken it by mistake, do not leave the vehicle. Switch off your torch and reverse to safety. Safety? John's words echoed through my head again. Badgers. Yeah, terrible, terrible badgers. My eyes flickered back to the map in my lap, where the green trail looped neatly around the park and the red trail cut off through the woods like a vein. The red route is not for you. I didn't enjoy that wording either. Then I found the next line and felt my whole face twist. Rule 4. Coffee. You may use the coffee in my drawer, but only if you put the milk in before the water. Anything other than that is a crime in my eyes. Underneath that, in thicker pen, were 2 words, written so hard they nearly tore the paper. I'll know. I lowered the page slowly and stared at reception. Somewhere behind those walls sat Linda and a crossword, and apparently a man whose idea of moral collapse involved basic hot drink preparation. I felt genuine disgust then, which was almost reassuring. There was something comforting about the fact that even in what appeared to be a haunted woodland resort, someone still had the time and energy to be objectively wrong about coffee. Milk first. Psychotic behaviour. I shook my head and moved on. Rule 5. If you see Linda outside, check whether Linda is still in reception before speaking to her. If you can't confirm where Linda is, do not let the woman outside in the vehicle. I glanced at reception again. Through the dark, towards the windows, as though I might catch sight of her from here. I couldn't. The angle was wrong. All I could see was my own faint reflection in the buggy windscreen and the trees behind me. I looked back down quickly. Rule 7. Whistle use. You are the only member of staff that has a whistle. This is for your safety. If something in the trees whistles, remain where you are and count to 100 before moving. If it whistles twice, you have been noticed and may disregard the rest of these rules as they will no longer help you. I read that one 3 times. Then I looked inside the glove box again and, for the first time, noticed a whistle tucked right at the back beside the mints. I picked it up between 2 fingers and turned it over in my hand and saw teeth marks pressed into the plastic mouthpiece. Real ones. My stomach shifted uncomfortably. The joke had gone a bit stale by then. Up until that point, I'd been trying very hard to sort the rules into one of two boxes. Either they were part of an elaborate initiation ritual designed to frighten new starters, or they were the product of a workplace where every single employee had quietly lost their mind and agreed not to mention it. The whistle in my hand made both options feel less funny. I folded the paper back along its old creases and slipped it into my jacket pocket, telling myself I'd only keep it because if John jumped out later asking questions, I wanted to be able to say I'd read his stupid list. Then I put the torch on the passenger seat, started Betsy with a grumbling cough from the engine, and looked once more at the map spread over my lap. The green route wound safely through the heart of the park, skirting the lodges, the leisure complex, and the pancake house at the edge of the lake before looping back to the reception. The red trail cut into the woods and vanished among the trees. I told myself I was smiling because the whole thing was ridiculous. The truth was, by that point, I was starting to feel watched, and I wanted badly enough for the rules to be a joke that I almost resented the dark for not laughing with me. So I put Betsy into gear, turned onto the green route, and began my first round. The first round was quiet enough to make me feel stupid. I saw a squirrel. That was it. No phantom lodges, no children with woodland-themed identity issues, no murderous badgers launching themselves out of the undergrowth. Just damp paths, dark trees, and the creeping embarrassment of someone realising they might have taken a joke too seriously. By the time I looped back towards reception, I was already thinking about coffee. As I passed the front of the building, I saw Linda standing outside by the steps. She was half in shadow, arms folded, glasses catching the light from the inside. When she noticed me, she lifted one hand in a small, absent sort of wave. I waved back automatically, then carried on with my route. A few minutes later, I pulled Betsy back up outside reception, suddenly desperate for the coffee I'd been judging so harshly earlier. The lights inside were still warm and yellow. The vending machine still hummed, everything looked exactly the same. Linda was sitting at a desk, glasses low on her nose, filling in a crossword as if she hadn't moved an inch. I stopped in the doorway. She looked up. 7 letters. Deeply unsettled. I looked back through the glass towards the steps where I'd seen her standing. They were empty. I swallowed hard. Unnerved, I muttered. She returned to a crossword without another word. That was when the folded sheet in my pocket seemed to grow teeth. I didn't want to go back out there. Something about that tiny impossible moment with Linda had got under my skin in a way I couldn't easily brush off. I stood there for a few seconds longer than necessary, keys in hand, while my brain scrambled to hand me an explanation I could live with. Someone else could have been standing outside. The light may have caught the glass strangely. I could have seen a reflection. I was tired, skint, alone in the dark, and primed by a list of bizarre threats written in marker pen by people who clearly had too much time on their hands and not enough supervision. That had to be it. It had to be. So I made myself leave reception before I could embarrass myself any further. I climbed back into Betsy and carried on with my route. For a while, everything settled again. The path curved between the lodges in long dark bends, each one lit just enough to show me the road and not much else. The trees leaned over the track in places, their branches shifting softly in the wind, and every now and then I caught a glow of a patio light through the gaps. Somewhere in the distance I heard a dull metallic clatter of something not properly secured. Maybe a gate, maybe a sign, maybe somebody's bike. It was all ordinary enough that I started to feel annoyed with myself for getting rattled. By the time I reached the pancake house, I'd almost talked myself back to normal. The building sat quiet under the trees, all dark windows and cheerful signage that looked faintly sinister when nobody was around to enjoy it. The painted smiling stack of pancakes by the door didn't help. There's something deeply untrustworthy about a cartoon breakfast item grinning at you in near total darkness. I probably would have driven straight past it if I hadn't heard the crying. It was soft at first, almost swallowed by the wind, but unmistakably a child. The kind of crying that comes in little shivery bursts like someone trying and failing to be brave about it. I slowed immediately. The sound was coming from the side of the building, near one of the picnic benches. I pulled Betsy to a stop and reached for the torch before I'd really thought any of it through. Lost kid, late at night, alone, whatever weird little games the staff here played with the rules. I wasn't about to leave a child sitting outside in the cold because somebody had written something stupid about owls. "Hello?" I called, climbing out. "Are you all right?" The crying hitched. I rounded the side of the pancake house and found her sitting on the edge of a bench, shoulders hunched, head bowed, clutching something soft to her chest. A little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, pale in the torchlight, hair hanging damp around her face, little trainers muddy at the toes. Her coat was zipped wrong, one side higher than the other, as if she'd done it herself in a hurry. She looked up when the beam found her, and the expression on her face was so open and miserable that all the unease in me loosened at once. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, already moving closer. "What are you doing out here on your own?" She sniffled hard and wiped her face with the back of her sleeve.
"I can't find my dad."
There was a wobble in her voice that made her even younger. "That's all right," I said, gentling my tone without even thinking about it. "We'll sort that. Come on, let's get you inside where it's warm, yeah?" She nodded, but she didn't stand up. Her hand stayed wrapped tightly around the toy in her lap. I took another step and crouched a little so I wouldn't loom over her. The torch beam dipped with me, catching the edge of the stuffed animal she was holding. Small, brownish, soft looking. An owl. I thought vaguely. My hand was already half extended before the rule surfaced in my head. If you find a child crying near the pancake house holding a stuffed owl, you must ask them the colour of the owl. I stopped. The words arrived too late and with none of the force they should have had. For a second, I just stared at her, hearing the sentence again in John's voice, feeling the folded paper in my pocket like a weight. The girl looked up at me with wet lashes and a little red nose.
"What's wrong?"
"Nothing," I said too quickly. Then, because apparently I'm the sort of idiot who can remember a rule and still not obey it properly, I glanced at the toy in her arms instead of asking her the question straight away. The torchlight had shifted. What I'd taken for an owl was turned partly away from me. Its face lost in shadow. I could make out one stitched ear. Blunt snout, maybe? The shape was wrong. Or maybe it had always been wrong and I'd only filled in the rest because owl was what I expected to see. A cold little thread slipped down the back of my neck. I lifted my torch slightly. The girl smiled. It was a tiny change, but it changed everything. 1 second she looked frightened and young and lost. The next there was something watchful in her expression, something patient, as if she'd been waiting for me to catch up. I finally asked, "What's the colour of your owl?" She hugged it tighter. Then she tilted her head and said, very clearly,
"It's a badger."
For a second nothing happened. Then something moved in the tree line. The sound came first, leaves shivering low to the ground, twigs snapping in quick, sharp little bursts. Not one set of footsteps, several, fast, close together. The sort of movement that belongs to things built for skimming over the earth at speed. I swung the torch towards the woods. Eyes caught the beam. Dozens of them. Tiny reflections scattered in the dark at knee height, blinking in and out between the roots and undergrowth. The bodies behind them were harder to make out at first because they moved in a horrible low fluid way, close to the ground and quicker than my brain wanted to process. Dark backs, pale striped faces, claws tearing up leaf mounds as they pushed through the trees. Badgers. So many badgers. My breath locked in my throat. The thing in the little girl's arms shifted. I looked down just in time to see its head lift. It wasn't stuffed. The fur was clotted and thick in places. One eye milky white, the other bright and wet like torchlight. Its lips peeled back from small bloody teeth and a growl rattled out of it. Far too deep and vicious for something that size. Saliva hung in strings from its mouth. One front paw flexed against the girl's sleeve, and I saw dirt packed into its claws. I stumbled backwards so hard I nearly went over. The little girl didn't cry anymore. She just sat there smiling at me while the badger in her lap twisted around to look where the others were gathering in the dark. Then the whole tree line started moving. They came out low and fast and horribly certain of themselves, pouring over the ground in a rush of bodies and snapping jaws. There was no hesitation in them at all. No animal caution, no pause, just intent. I dropped the torch. That part, at least, the rules had gotten exactly right. The beam hit the ground and spun wildly, throwing broken strips of light over claws, wet fur and the glossy black curve of little hunting noses. Something screamed. It took me a second to realise it was me. Then I ran. I have never ran so fast in my life. That probably sounds dramatic given the circumstances, but I used to run competitively, and even at my fittest I had never moved like that before. Pure fear does something to your body. It strips you down to the oldest, ugliest part of yourself. There was no dignity left in me at all. No thought either, really. An overwhelming certainty that if I slowed down for even a second, something low to the ground and full of teeth was going to hit the back of my legs. Branches lashed at my face as I tore off the path in the dark. I could hear them behind me. The trees closed in fast. Torch gone, map useless, breath tearing at my throat. I kept one arm up over my face as I ran blind through the brambles and hanging branches, skidding on leaves, catching myself. At one point I hit something low and hard with my shin and nearly went down. Then I saw light. It shone through the trees ahead of me in low yellow strips, broken by branches and leaves, and I almost sobbed with relief. It was a lodge. It had to be. A proper one. Occupied, safe, people inside. People with normal problems and fleece gilets and children whining about swimming tomorrow. I could have kissed the first middle-aged dad in novelty slippers I saw. I angled towards it without thinking, crashing through the last stretch of bush so hard the twigs snapped off in my hair. As I got closer, I heard laughter. I stumbled onto the path, reached the front step in 2 long strides and shoved the door open without knocking. Heat hit me first, then light, then silence. A long dinner table took up most of the open-plan room, and around it sat a family. Mother, father, 2 boys, grandmother maybe. Every one of them turned to look at me at exactly the same time. Nobody blinked. The father had his wine glass halfway to his mouth and held it there without moving. The woman beside him wore a pale cardigan and a smile so wide it looked painted on. The boys sat there with their hands folded on the table, identical in their stillness despite one being maybe 8 and the other 12. The old woman at the end had a napkin spread carefully across her lap, and eyes so bright they seemed to catch the light too well. For a second, all I could hear was my own breathing. Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The family kept staring. "Sorry," I panted, because apparently that's what British people say when they burst into houses while being pursued through the woods by carnivorous nightmares. "I need help. There's a child outside, and there are badgers, and I know that sounds stupid, but I need you to..." My voice died in my throat. There was something in the middle of the table. It had been arranged like a centerpiece. At first, my exhausted brain tried to make it into something ordinary. A roast, a sculpture, one of those horrible rustic table decorations people make out of driftwood and poor judgment. Then the light steadied for half a second and I saw hair, skin, a closed eye, teeth just visible between parted lips. It was a human head. I stopped breathing. The mother's smile widened. Behind me, from the open doorway, I heard the little girl's voice.
"I'm happy we could have you for dinner."
Every muscle in my body locked. The room seemed to tilt very slightly, as if the whole lodge had shifted on its foundations just to enjoy this moment. I turned my head inch by inch towards the door. She was standing there in the moonlight. Her coat was still zipped wrong. Her hair still hung damp around her face. She held the animal in both arms like a favourite toy, only now there was no mistaking it. The thing's striped face hung towards me, jaw slack, one eye pale and ruined, the other bright with a horrible alert intelligence. Its claws flexed against her sleeves. She took one small step forward into the doorway, and the light from the outside caught the inside of the door as it swung slightly wider on its hinges. Red. The door was red. Something cold dropped clean through me. Lodge 404. There is no Lodge 404. If you hear a family laughing inside, blow your whistle once and walk away backwards. I couldn't walk away backwards. I was already inside. The father slowly set down his glass. The sound was tiny, delicate, and somehow terrified me more than the head on the table. The old woman spoke first. "What lovely manners," she said, in the warm, approving tone someone might use about a child remembering to say please. "She came right in." The head on the table had been positioned facing my side of the room. I could see enough of it now to know it belonged to a man. Middle-aged, eyes closed, mouth slightly open, expression oddly peaceful in a way that made my stomach convulse. The little girl took another step. The badger in her arm shifted its head and looked at me. Then the whole family smiled wider at once. I don't remember deciding to move. I remember the father half raising out of his chair with a stiff, puppet-like grace of something unused to being in a human body. I remember the lights flickering again and the girl beginning to laugh in the doorway. And I remember grabbing the nearest thing to my hand, a chair I think, and hurling it sideways with every bit of strength and panic I had left in me. It hit the table hard enough to send plates smashing to the floor. The family moved all at once. That was enough. I bolted for the back of the lodge, shoulder checking through the door I barely saw, crashing into the utility space and then out through another exit into the dark again before anything behind me could get their hands on me. The cold night air hit me like a slap. Then I was running again. This time there was no path at all. I tore through the woods in whatever direction seemed like a way, slipping down the muddy inclines, grabbing at trunks to keep my balance, dragging in wet, desperate breaths that felt too small for my lungs. Branches snagged my jacket, mud splashed up the back of my legs. Something sharp cut across my palm when I put my hand out against a tree and slid off it. Somewhere behind me I heard movement, though whether it was the family, the badgers, or something else entirely, I didn't stop to work it out. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Every instinct in me screamed that if I looked back, I would lose whatever terrible fragile lead I had. Or worse, I would see something that would make me freeze. So I kept going, with tears streaming from the force of the wind and my own ragged breath roaring in my ears, until the ground levelled out under my feet and a familiar glow appeared through the trees ahead. Reception. I nearly collapsed with relief. I burst through the doors, drenched in sweat, streaked with mud and shaking so hard the glass rattled behind me when it slammed shut. The warmth hit me like a wave, along with the hum of the vending machine and the faint smell of old carpet, and the surreal sound of upbeat pop music drifting in softly from the radio behind the desk. Something by Taylor Swift, I think. Cheerful, bouncy, deeply fucking inappropriate. Everything was normal. Bright lights, clean floor, leaflets on local activities spread in perfect little rows, a plastic rack of key rings near the till. The sort of boring, harmless reception area you could stand in for 10 minutes and forget immediately. Linda looked up from a crossword. She took me in properly then. The mud, the heaving chest, the scratches across my hand, the state of my face, which I can only assume was doing things no human face should. And very calmly she put her pen down. "Rough night?" "Rough night." That was her response. And it turns out, from then on, that's all I've ever got from her. The reason why I ask if you know what it's like to be ripped apart by badgers is because, well, I still work here. And, well, it hasn't happened to me. Yet. Yeah, thanks, Linda. So I just wanted to know. I take the rules seriously now, which is how I found out the badgers aren't even the worst things in the forest. But that's another story. Hi everyone, thanks for listening. Special thanks to the keeper who helped me out on this one. He voiced John. Go and check him out. He has an amazing voice. And special thanks to my daughter, Luna Creepypasta. She voiced the little girl.
Stop.
Are you still here?
You collaborated.
Yeah.
Weak.
Rude.
Accurate.
Working together's good.
That is what the least talented one would say.
Hey,